It's the 8th round of the Tata Steel 2021 Chess Tournament, and ladies and gentlemen, today was a fantastic day of chess, a lot of amazing storylines. I've got 4 games to show you, and first we are going to kick things off with Magnus Carlsen playing with the black pieces against Andrei ESIPENKO, who's an 18-year-old, high 2600 level Grandmaster looking to break into the 2700 club and establish himself as Russia's next prodigy. He begins with the move e4, and when you play e4 against Magnus, there's a chance he lashes out with a Sicilian, but this one is a bit more rare. d4, take, and we get a Najdorf. Now, of course, we've seen the Najdorf Sicilian be played quite a bit in this tournament, but when Magnus plays the Sicilian, it's usually something with a Sveshnikov defense. So Andrei plays bishop e2, Magnus plays e6, going for the I keep saying Chevignon, and I know that's not how you're supposed to pronounce it. I think it's pronounced like Chevignon, but that sounds vaguely French, so let's just move on. g4. Super aggressive, and basically Andrei is letting Magnus know that he's here, and he's ready to fight, and he wants to go g5. And the best move for black, according to theory in this position, when I say theory, by the way, I mean games that have already been played many times in the database by computers, established as the best move, and that move is d5, lashing out in the center, which can lead to a big simplification. So whether or not Magnus remembered everything after d5 or not, or just wanted to mix things up, he plays b5, g5, and when this knight moved back, this is under attack, and Andrei just let it go. Frozen style, and just sacked the pawn, which led to a position where he's pressuring Magnus already. He's got no g-pawn, he might lose a second one, but he's gonna castle long, which he literally does, and Magnus has a lack of development, so Magnus brings his queen back, ready for the next stage of the game. Andrei plays f4, mobilizing his pawns, bishop b7, king b1, always a useful, flexible waiting move, and Magnus Carlsen finished his development by playing the move knight to c6. And he is now ready to castle. And here, Andrei ESIPENKO, despite his tremendous respect and admiration for his opponent, decided that even gods can bleed, and played the move knight takes b5. And it became very clear very quickly that Magnus Carlsen had drastically made a mistake. The point is that after a takes b5, knight takes knight, bishop takes, there is the glorious clearance resource, queen c3. And black has no defense. What a ridiculous geometric motif where 2 pieces are hanging upon the clearance of all the pieces, and all of a sudden, Magnus is down and he is hurt. The b5 pawn is hanging, the d6 pawn is hanging, d7 is under pressure, so he has to sacrifice a pawn as he does and counterattack Andrei. Andrei finds a beautiful idea, d6. Creating a passed pawn for himself and counterattacking the queen when it moves out of the way. He scoops up a second pawn, and after rook b8, he plays queen c4, rook takes a3. It is far from over. Magnus has these rooks staring down at him, but Andrei plays queen c7. A nice idea once again, looking to simplify, forcing queen e8. Magnus can't trade. And now Andrei, just beautiful, absolutely beautiful move. Rook to g5. I mean, this is class. Watch where this rook goes. It goes to the other side of the board, defended by his queen, to trade. He is trying to trade off Magnus's rook, but when Magnus doesn't trade with him, he's able to play b3, and now the rook is going to be useful on an infiltration level. Rook comes back to b7, queen comes out, and now bishop to f3. The final piece of the puzzle, the bishop is on the diagonal, rook before queen goes back to c7, Magnus steps out of danger. The problem is that if you take here, I'm going to take on b3, but I play rook to a8, and I'm just in time to trade. If you move this knight out of the way, I'm going to make a queen, so queen to f5, continuing to threaten rook takes b3, king b2, rook b5. The knight has fallen, rook c5, rook c1, stabilizing. He picks up the pawn, but check, king g7, and the pawn pushes. And Magnus Carlsen can give a check, but once the king moves out of the way, it is all over. And Andrei ESIPENKO is going to win this game. And that is why in this position, Magnus Carlsen resigned, and Andrei ESIPENKO defeated the world champion. Their first classical game ever. Andrei has a famous picture on the internet of him with Magnus Carlsen side by side, where he's just like a little kid, and it's just incredible. And I wanted to show you a clip actually of the whole ordeal. I mean, this is first a clip of the whole resignation. You know, Magnus sets up the pieces and heads away, and you can just see, you know, Andrei's emotion. You know, like he's just overwhelmed. He's looking off to the side. He finally breathes a sigh of relief. Like, did this really just happen? Oh my god, I can't believe that did that really just happen? And he's like, you know, talking to the arbiter's like, damn, you got him, that's crazy. And, you know, there's just all of this. And then, of course, he gave an interview with Fiona, and this one was hilarious. This interview afterward, they were on, you know, they have this very nice studio there. And for this one, you will hear the sound. She asked him what he's going to do tomorrow, because tomorrow's a rest day, and this just cracked me up.
Do you have any plans for what you're going to do tomorrow?
I think I will go to the supermarket.
Everybody started laughing when he said that. Like, you know, she's like, what are you going to do on the rest day? And basically, he was like lost for words. He just didn't know what to do. He's like, I can't believe that just happened. I still can't believe it just happened. And I know the feeling, you know, I've won some huge games in my life that came out of nowhere, were tense fights, and I've cried after big wins before just because I've just been so overwhelmed. So amazing to see, and great to see him, you know, kind of like this might be his big break, his huge boost of confidence. But ladies and gentlemen, I've got more games for you. We're going to now go to Fabiano Caruana versus Anish Giri, because this was an exciting game. First of all, Fabiano plays a Jobava London system, which is crazy that he doesn't go into any of Anish's prep and just plays this, leading to a really complicated game with a super imbalanced, like, you know, normally h4, h5 is played in some of these positions. They traded, and Anish playing like a, you know, very direct assault on the queen side, like very high level stuff. Knight to h5, delaying his own castling to try to trade knight for bishop. Fabi plays h4, take, and now we get h5 because he doesn't want to attack him. It's a wild game, you know? Normally we get like classy stuff from these guys like Rui Lopez, Sicilian Defense, Grunfeld. I don't know why I'm doing that accent. And then, you know, now we just, it's like they both got drunk in a bar and just went to fight each other. I don't know. And of course it was crazy. I mean, we got g4, take, you know, sliding back. And then look at all of Anish's pawns on light squares. He doesn't have a light squared bishop, so he has a, you know, a complex of light squared pawns and a dark squared bishop. Knight to h5. And this was a crazy game, man. I gotta tell you. Fabiano built up his pressure, sacrificed the pawn for activity, then played queen c3 because he's like, okay, I've got knight c6. Whoops, knight c6 takes. Oh my arrow drawing. And he does it, and then, like, you know, Anish plays queen c7, and then king d7 has to move his king out of danger. But ultimately, as all things Super GM, the game ultimately ends with a queen and 5 versus queen and 5 endgame. And still, you know, some tricks here, but you have to not, you know, trade the queen too quickly if you're one of the sides with a passive king, because the active king will win in the endgame. But listen, these guys are professionals, and they end up repeating moves. But listen, a fun game, an exciting game. And I've got one more fun and exciting game for you between MVL and Jordan van Forest, who is one of the younger players in the tournament, and before today was tied for first place. So we got to look at him. Look at this game. E4, E5, a Rui Lopez mainline. But now we get a defense with one of the coolest names, in my opinion. This is called the Arkhangelsk variation. There's a K at the end, Arkhangelsk. But it's Archangel. I mean, what a cool name. It's the Archangel Rui Lopez when you play bishop c5 and you allow white to play c3, d4. So Jordan van Forest finds an idea in this opening, which barely gets played, and against the super GM of Maxime's caliber, and then here plays a move already on move 9 with like 5 games ever played in the database, like 10 games played, and watch what he uncorks. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and it looks like you're just losing a pawn in the center. But I have queen to e7. And then if you take my c6 pawn to attack my queen, I'm going to go here. And it looks like really stupid stuff, because like your knight is going to be taken with damaged structure. I'm going to take your bishop. Looks like white is just doing very well. And then here, Mr. Jordan van Forest uncorks an absolutely savage move, one of the most savage moves I've ever seen in my life. Bishop to h3. Yeah. The point being that you have to take it, or else you get mated. And for a moment, MVL has 7 points extra of material. And Jordan doesn't even take. He plays rook to d8, attacking the queen on d1. And it's crazy because you're going to lose the bishop, and then I might even take this and come here and mate you. So MVL needs to be super careful. First he gives back the bishop, and then he gives back the knight. Because look, if he tries to escape, I have check, king moves, and I can go rook takes d2. I was going to say queen d5 check, which actually also doesn't look terrible, but I guess there's queen f3 there with some tricks, but rook takes d2. Rook takes d2, and now this is guarded, and you are still threatening queen d5. So queen f3, he has to lose both pieces, and Jordan is still down one pawn, but it's hardly anything. He continues to create some threats, but MVL very quickly trades all the pieces off to avoid any further complications. We get into a rook endgame, and, you know, despite MVL having, for a very brief moment, an extra pawn, he chooses not to go rook a3 and defend because activity in endgames is super important. So, rook c6, and a few moves later, the players agreed to a draw. What a bit of preparation from Jordan van Forest, the young guy, under 2,700, showing up with some top-level prep. Bishop h3? What? I mean, I don't think he found that over the board, and if he did, he's a genius. But, of course, ladies and gentlemen, we've saved the best for last. Once again. Listen, I know we have a lot of Indian fans, and I know we have a lot of support for Pintala Harikrishna, but it's an Alireza FIROUZJA game. He's got the black pieces again. And, wow. It's not just a day for Magnus Carlsen and Andrei ESIPENKO. It's also a day for Alireza FIROUZJA. So we get a Slav defense, d4, d5, c4, c6. And Pintala takes. And normally, you know, symmetrical structure like this can be a little bit boring. And maybe Pintala was like, I'm gonna get, you know, the life sucked out of Firo, and I'm going to bore him to death. But the game very quickly became imbalanced. So first of all, Alireza does not develop in a symmetrical style to his opponent. He puts his knight on e7. He then plays a6 and f6. So FIROUZJA's always looking for a fight, man. He's always looking for a fight. f6 to try to play e5 and bring the bishop back like this. Just a super unique way to play the position. Bishop slides back, and we get bishop g3 and h5. Like, what? How does he manage to create something exciting out of, like, nothing all the time? g5, knight g6. Nah. I'm not taking you. You gotta come and take me. But I'm not gonna take back. h4. Okay, you take on g7, I take. What about your bishop? Bishop has to come to e5. Take, knight to d4. Position is very imbalanced. Super imbalanced. I mean, both kings in the open, well, not quite in the open, but in the center. Pawns falling on all sides of the board. Rook c8, but Pintala castles. And Alireza slides the knight back to c6 to pressure the center. Bishop goes to g4, knight takes, pawn takes. He volunteers the opening of the e-file despite his own king being there because he realizes that after rook c6, everything is stable. Pintala plays knight to e2, looking for a trade of rooks and a reroute, and Alireza plays the move h3, which is not the world's most accurate move in this position, but it's a fascinating idea because he wants to bring his queen over here, and the king doesn't have any breathing room left. Again, we keep seeing these pawns, not to mention in all endgames, you know, taking a pawn on h2 means that pawn will be an asset. Rook c3, he goes for it, now rook h4. The second idea that Alireza had, rook g3, queen slides over to c7. Rook e1, king to f8. I don't need a castle, dude. I just hide my king behind my bishops, obviously. Queen d3. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Alireza plays the only move in the position to give himself any hope of winning the game, and that is the move e5. Volunteering the board for an explosion. Okay? Queen a3 check, trades off the queens, understanding that even though he doesn't have a queen, which is his most powerful attacking piece, White has traded off his very active piece as well. And we are going to have pressure on both sides. I get to choose where this rook is going. I sack the h-pawn as a decoy, and now I take on d4 defended by my bishop. Knight slides back to c1 to stop the pawns, rook to h6 with pressure. Bishop back to g2, I'm taking. Knight to d3, rook comes back. Everything is covered. Now Alireza is a pawn up, but these pawns don't leave a very good impression on the position, so Pintala plays the move f4. And that move was just the destabilization of the position that was needed for Alireza to begin infiltrating on the other side of the board. Bishop to f3, rook slides out of danger, rook g2, rook g6. Alireza is so good at balancing the act of putting extra spice into a position with when the right trades have to be made. He made a queen trade earlier. You would think he needed the queen to create an attack, but he doesn't always need the queen to create an attack. He doesn't always need the rook to create an attack either. Alireza FIROUZJA is not interested in keeping pieces on the board because of some meta concept that he needs to attack his opponent by having more pieces. No, he's interested in finding the damn best move on the board every single time. And my god is he succeeding. f5, and now this is all he needed. Sorry, this is all he needed. He just goes out of the way. This one subtle pawn move, removing the pawn from a square where it used to be protected, is now a new target for him. And when the knight comes to f4 to try to make forward progress, he says, d3. Clearance, sacrifice. creating bishop d4 for himself. Yes, it was a blunder by Hari. Hari could have played something like rook to e2, for example, a weird, strange, not so simple and obvious move, because if black plays bishop f6, the computer's next idea is a3. So the computer really has no idea how to defend this position. It's basically sit around and wait for Alireza to destroy you. He plays knight f4, d3, the knight comes back, and bishop d4. Clearance, sacrifice. Give back a pawn to occupy a square, knight f2, and rook c2. Why did he go back? Because if he plays king to f1, rook to h3 is an x-ray, and you're losing, regardless of how you defend this position. Rook c2, king f1, rook takes, and Alireza is now picking up the pawns. Rook b1 check, rook b6. He's now made the 40 moves, so he has the extra time. And the rest of the game was spent simplifying in the right way, activating the king. Look at this, a king activation. You plug this into the computer, top engine move. King e7, activate the king in the endgame, get it to f6 for this weak pawn, which he created like 10 moves ago. Everything Alireza does has an incredible flow to it, it seems like, when he's playing against some of these people who he has extreme confidence against. Only Magnus Carlsen, it seems, can rattle his nerves. It seems like that's just how it is. He now picks up the f5 pawn. Hare Krishna, to his credit, does get the b7 pawn, but at what cost? At the cost of allowing Alireza to bring all the pieces in one wave forward. Forward, 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 knight to d6, bishop to d2, beautiful idea, and everybody pushes, and one subtle pawn move to d3. The last pawn move on d3 broke in. The final move of the game is pawn to d3, and Pentala resigns because he cannot check him. And, you know, if you play a random move like a3, you're just losing this. The point of this last move was that if you took, I would play king e2, and black is still winning, but at least it's some sort of fork, and maybe, you know, well, whatever. There was also bishop a5. So he could have taken the rook, but Alireza plays d3, a nice little nail in the coffin, and there is nothing that Pentala Hare Krishna could do. This is Alireza Firouzja's third win of this tournament with the black pieces. He continues to impress. He continues to dazzle. So does Andrei ESIPENKO, who's having a fantastic event. And one person who is struggling is right there in the middle spot. Pentala and Magnus Carlsen are now tied for the 7th and 8th spots in the event out of 14 players. Alireza Firouzja is in first place. He has 5.5 points out of 8. He's in clear first. 5 points are also between Andrei ESIPENKO, the man who defeated Magnus Carlsen today, Anish Giri, JORDEN van Foreest, and Fabiano Caruana. There are some rounds left to go. Trust me, 5 more games, 9, 10, 11, 12, and round 13. But oh my goodness, are these the people that we expected at the top of this event? 8 rounds in? No, it's not. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we watch chess. Because you never know who can win in a game on the 64 squares.